Inspire Instructor podcast, where the learning never stops. Welcome, you wonderful people, to Inspire Instructor Training podcast. So on today's episode, I'm joined by Dr Julia Malkin MBE, and we are talking all about neurodiversity and helping pupils with neurodiversity. So I found this episode absolutely fascinating. Dr Julia's got a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of facts and understanding. So this is a really great episode if you have any pupils with neurodiversity or regularly dealing with pupils with neurodiversity. I think it's also just a good episode because there's an element of how we support pupils with neurodiversity. It is a way we should be helping all of our pupils really as well. So some great tips for all your pupils, not just neurodiverse pupils. So before we get onto the episode, I would just like to talk about our membership at Inspire Instructor Training. So it's £20 a month for the membership, and it's all the CPD that you could need really. So we have courses on things from goal setting to question techniques to how to help with your part 3 and standards checks. We have sitting in on the lessons where you get to watch a driving lesson. So loads of different types of courses that offer a range for whoever is needing whatever type of CPD you need, along with support from myself and Diana. So for £20 a month, all the CPD you need. So we're still offering our Try Before You Buy offer at the moment, which is 3 days for free. And then you can cancel if you want to, or obviously continue with the membership. All you have to do is when you log in and sign up is use the code BINSPIRED. That's B-inspired. Thank you and enjoy the show. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast Dr Julia Malkin MBE. And I think I want to talk to you about neurodiversity and dealing with pupils with neurodiversity. And I couldn't think of a better person to get onto the podcast to have that conversation. Now, I think my first question to you, and my first sort of kind of comment is I've seen on Facebook quite a lot when people ask about dealing with pupils with autism or ADHD. Nearly, if you look in the comments, like there's several people will have commented saying they know themselves best, so just ask them how to support them. And I'm sure there's an element of truth to that, but it feels like a weak answer, it feels like a bit of a cop out. And I wonder what your thoughts on that are, and whether you sort of kind of hold that belief that they know themselves best and therefore just ask them how to handle it.
I can understand the conversation. It's a 50-50 split with this. First of all, it's absolutely right. If you want to know about autism, you ask the autistic person. And me, as an autistic person, people come to me to ask me. But every single person on the spectrum is different. The spectrum's a big place. I mean, the first thing you've got is people at one end of the spectrum who will never speak and can't look after themselves without help. On the other end of the spectrum, people with multiple doctorates, and between those two poles, there's a huge spectrum of people. Now, the thing is, they've all got personalities, just like everyday people have. So some people will open up and talk about themselves, but some people will not. And also, what they try to put through, they have communication difficulties, so the instructors might not be able to understand 100% as to how that support should take place. I mean, there's such a lot of difference. There's 3 main autism levels, and level 1 is most likely people that the instructors likely to see, but I've taught autistic level 2 and 3 as well. It's quite difficult because there are accompanying conditions with autism on the top 2, and they have to think about whether or not a person's got another condition as well as the autism. That's why some people appear to be disabled, but it's not a disability. It's because of the conditions on the top. Autism is not a disability, it's a difference. But the main thing is you're going to get 2 categories of people that are most likely to see when instructors ask them about the condition. The first thing is that you're going to get people on the autistic spectrum who are aware they've got it, but do not know enough about the condition to be able to respond and ask what support they're going to need. The other half knows about the condition, but they're so terrified of being judged, bullied, ridiculed, etc., that they will not disclose a thing. So either way, your instructor is going to end up with lack of knowledge. And so therefore, it's very difficult sometimes for a person on the spectrum to be able to speak up, especially someone in authority, like a driving instructor is perceived to be a high authority, to be able to get them to speak about the condition because they're so frightened of being judged. If they were to speak as equals, they'd be frightened of bullying, but judgment is the main problem, which is a higher authority would judge them. And if you were to see an autism diagnosis report, if I was to look at my own diagnosis report, it'd be all bias negative. This person will have problems with 1, 2, 3, 4, needs help with 5, 6, 7, 8, and when they get older, they'll have 9, 10, 11. It's just negative, negative, negative. I had depression for 2 weeks because I read that report. I had to go to the doctors and get tablets for it. So it's not the sort of condition that is a positive thing to talk about. So because it's all negative, I've got problems with this and I've got difficulties with that. That's another reason why many of us won't speak, because a lot of us have low self-esteem because we've been through bullying in the past. The main problem is that a driving instructor will be able to get knowledge from people who are willing to open up, who know enough about how the condition affects them, and also are not afraid of speaking to somebody they believe to have high authority. Now, how many are going to fit into that category? You're going to have a person probably who won't even dare to bring the condition forward to the driving instructor. I get instructors coming to me saying, I'm sure this person's on the autism spectrum, but when I ask them, they won't say a thing. And that's because many of us will never disclose it. They will never disclose the condition to anyone because they're so frightened of the repercussions coming in. They just want to be treated like everybody else. A lot of people will not disclose their condition. I've come across a lot of people. And ADHD, especially, 65% of ADHD people are undiagnosed. They haven't even got a confirmed condition as technical diagnosis with papers, etc. Basically, a lot depends on behavior patterns that you're going to see in your car, which I teach with people that you can say, right, treat this person this way and this person this way. So it's not technically this person's autistic, therefore I need to. I don't need papers or diagnoses. If there's a behavior pattern that's a bit different in your car, is that a neurodiverse person? If that is a neurodiverse person, how do we go about the support that we need? And that's why my courses teach people like this. So it doesn't depend on a person giving a confirmed diagnosis. This person is autistic, this person has ADHD. So there's no pigeonholes for them to fit into. Neurodiversity is a big umbrella and there's a lot of conditions underneath. So you can't pigeonhole your people. There's no one size fits all for either autism or ADHD. And many people are both, which needs to be taught different again. So it's amazing the amount of diversity you're going to get with just autism and ADHD alone before you even deal with anything else. So you can listen to your people. Some people know enough about themselves to be able to say, please slow down, or please let me pull in first before you speak to me about anything complicated. And some apologize, saying, I'm sorry if I can't look you straight in the face. Yeah, some are very apologetic because they know how the condition affects them. But to what level does that tell the instructor about support?
So I think it's fascinating actually, because I when I'm listening to it, there's that kind of feels like there's two sides to it, in the fact that yes, there is things that we should be putting into place to maybe recognize some levels of neurodiversity in the pupil, and also some levels of what can we do about that. But also it's also about treating everyone as an individual. Now, actually, when I'm listening to that, I think actually in a way that's how we should be delivering all of our lessons, whether it's neurodiversity or not. I remember listening to a podcast, I think it was called Sencast, and they were talking about that within normal in education, like schools, and they were saying how rather than having this is your lesson plan and then this is your SEN lesson plan, if you dealt the whole sort of kind of lesson plan around someone towards like a special educational needs, you would be creating a good lesson for someone without special educational needs as well, because it's individual and it's aimed at them, and everyone has their own learning preferences and styles anyway. So is that something instructors can be doing regardless of neurodiversity or not? Is aiming their lessons, having maybe a diverse way of delivering lessons so they can aim it to the individual?
Well, that is why when I train my instructors, either online or in a workshop or one-to-one in the car, because we're running car training, I give them techniques that every single pupil can benefit from. There's techniques that I can show them and say, look, it doesn't matter if you haven't got any special needs pupils, you can practice this technique with your everyday pupils as well. And they will learn from it. And I mean, honestly, some of the people that have use the the training that I teach for the conditions to all their pupils have got the same system. So every single one of their pupils is taught using this system, and it works well with them. And I'm very, very pleased it does, because it doesn't matter who a person is that comes into the car. There's one type of lesson plan to fit everybody, which of course is adjustable depending on the type of person you're dealing with, and speed of learning. There's loads of different things that affect a person other than neurodiversity. So you've got to be able to adapt that plan, but there can't be a one-size-fits-all plan for everybody, because you have to adapt it. Even if there's one universal system, it needs to be adapted for every single person. But the system that I use for training, many of my instructors use that for every single one of their people because it works well. Because that means that it's inclusion. It means that people on the spectrum are taught the same way as the everyday people are in the car.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's exactly how I would like to go about it. In fact, I remember a situation with myself teaching not so long ago a girl with autism, and she actually went to university and did a presentation about how I'd taught her or involved her in the car, because and it was really weird for me in a way, because I hadn't actually done anything different to how I do it with all of my pupils. I would just spoken to her and got her opinion on how she would like to go best about these things. When we came across challenges, we had conversations about how she wants to overcome these challenges, and she was quite aware of her condition and how it affected her, and how she came. So it was really helpful from my point of view. She did know a lot about her condition and how that helped. So and how it helped her actually as well. We did, like you were talking about all the negatives, but I think there was a lot of positives in her ability to scan the road a lot better, because she was super aware. So there are positives, I think, in that situation as well. So talking of maybe the negatives and the positives, I just let's split it up a little bit, because I get this is a generalization, but what are probably the most challenging things that someone with autism tends to come across when they're driving, when they're learning to drive? Like, what do they find most difficult?
Right, so basically, if they were asked something like 3 or 4 questions at once, it will confuse them. And there's a lot of confusion with everyday language. People go in the car, hello, how are you? How's things? They ask 4 or 5 questions in one sentence, and it just totally blows the brain. And the way in which we work, we have a lot of trouble with imagination and with processing. So when it comes through to an imaginative question, we have a lot of trouble processing, and I'll give you some examples of that. When people say to you, how are things? What kind of things are they talking about? Now, with the everyday people in everyday language, they're talking about things specific to that person within a given time. But the person is not mentioned nor the time period. So if we want to say, how are you today, to be a lot easier putting a person and time period. But when they just say, how are things as part of everyday language, what do they want to know? Do they want to know what the weather's like in South Africa, or how the Dow Jones is on the American stock market? What is it that they want? What information do they need? And of course, these brains are like computer files, especially with the higher level ones. So what you got is like a question coming in that opens a massive number of files all at once. And it's almost as if this computerized brain is scanning all these files, looking for the answer. What information does the person want to know when they are asked, how are things? and there's a massive load of files in there, and the person scans. So there might be an enormous time delay. Everybody else will say yes and fine, thank you, and we can kind of stumble with this enormous amount of. Oh, I'm thinking, what answer does this person want to give? Because there's a massive imagination gap in there. So, consequently, we've got a brain that's out there looking for all kinds of information and trying to process the entire lot. So we're trying to understand what you're saying as well as run all these files over. Which is, some will give you a rather blank look, some will say, I don't know, some will sit there waiting for 2 hours trying to generate an answer, trying to think, some will say totally the wrong thing, and oh dear, they can get really confused with a question like that, where you say, how are things? And it's totally different. So this is a standard thing. We get that every single day. You can walk into a place and somebody knows you and say, how are you? How are things? How's things with you? How's things? Yeah, thinking things, what things? Hang on, let's see if we can generate a bit of information. So a little tiny 2-word question like that can cause werewolf 3 to erupt in this brain up here. So the biggest number one we're going to want is communication help in the car. And that is because it's a one-to-one environment. It's easier for us to handle than it is in a group. But at the same time, it's very, very kind of like close proximity. And sometimes you also feel like you're being put on the spot. So I've had autistic people come online to me and say, my driving instructor does this and I can't understand what he's saying. So I have to interpret. I mean, some of my people have lessons with me in between the regular driving lessons so that I can then interpret to them what their driving instructor is saying. So when they go back to the next lesson, they know roughly what's going on. They think, oh, right, he was talking about this, and I know how to set this right up. I know how to answer it. So if this question's asked, you answer like that, because that's the information that he wants. So I often say things like that to meet people because they are sometimes reluctant to ask questions in the car for fear of having the self-esteem trash and feeling like that, you know what I mean? And thinking, oh, no, he thinks I'm an idiot, you know. So therefore, they disguise what they call masking. They disguise the condition as much as they can. So if you were to ask many people on the autism spectrum something that takes a long while for the brain to process and find the answer, sometimes you'll get a flat, I don't know. Technically, they will know. With a bit of practice, they could know. They need to go into the brain and search for all these files to find the answer. It is more important for them to have the conversation at everyday pace, 1, 2, 3, than it is for them to get the right answer to your question if it's too complex. Because that means there's going to be a massive time delay. The other person's going to see it and they're going to think, uh-oh, you know. And they want that condition to show. So they'll just say a straight I don't know because it's at a normal pace with the everyday person. So the conversation doesn't have any breaks and extended time periods in it.
Yeah, with that then, is it again similar to how I would maybe advise someone teaching anyone that gives you that I don't know answer is sort of building a rapport so they so there's trust there.
Trust is big number one. You can't teach us without that.
Yeah, no, I can't. I would say that for everybody, I think as well.
But us is all right. So that's a big number one. But us is an enormous number one. You will not get anywhere without that trust, and it takes much longer to build.
It's interesting. And is there an element there of as well, maybe reassuring the pupil that it is okay to take that time and to consider your question and consider their answer. So is that something instructors could be doing as well?
Oh dear, you're neurotypical, no question about it. Because I have to translate your questions in my head before I think and process it out. There's several factors in one question here, and I'm going to break it down so anybody watching on the spectrum can understand this as well. So first things first, you do not put any differences in there. Okay, that's big number one. Don't say, I realise you're on the autistic spectrum, so don't worry, you can take your time and take more longer if you need to, and all this. No, no, no. We say blanket regulations. I say right from the start. You can't ask me anything, and you can take your time when you can't ask me. And there's no such thing as a silly question. It might seem silly to you, but it's not silly to me. Everything in this car will never leave this car. It will never be shared with anybody else. It stays in the car. So If you think of a question immediately, you can ask me now. Or do you want 5 minutes at the end for you to think about questions where you can have both? What would you like? So then we pass the question over. So notice how that's got enough detail in to eliminate all the consequences. There's no mention of their condition. There's no mention of it won't go outside. They know that it's safe. They know that regardless of what it says, it's going to be listened to. That's how you do it.
Yeah, and again, I think that's how I would handle any pupil, to be honest.
I understand that, but us more so. We need that.
Yeah.
Everybody else will be imagination gaps in.
Hmm.
But with us, more so, you've got to fill those imagination gaps up. They will naturally start seeing holes, and you've got to fill holes in. I mean, one of those things I say at the start of the lesson, for example, is like, the everyday instructor might say, "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to take you on a road that I know you can handle." And and I'm thinking, yeah, but the problem is they'll be thinking, "What if something happens that I know I can't handle it?" And that thought will occur immediately because they've seen a hole and will get worried about it. So I will say something like, "When we take you out on the road, there'll be nothing I ask of you that I know you can't do, and everything you'll be able to handle. If there's something that happens on the road that I know you can't handle by yourself, I'll be there to help you. And if something happens that I know that you can't handle at all, even with help, I will do it for you." So you've covered all the holes in before you even start the lesson. They will not be able to see a hole in that, so they'll think, "Oh, this is fine. I'm going to be safe." Yeah.
I really like that. And I like the way you phrased that. And so what I'm thinking here is instructors who maybe don't have your expertise and they do leave those holes in the language. I'm wondering if there's an element of, again, it's that communication between you and the pupil and saying if there is anything, and you'll actually do it with me when we're having a conversation. So if there's something I've left a gap in, you go, actually, I'm going to fill in the gaps in my mind here. Is that something that the instructors can be doing? Is saying, I I might miss bits of information that you need. Please tell me before we set off driving if there's anything else you need to know.
So you're asking us about questioning, and you were saying to me, "If there's anything else you need, please let me know before we start." Now that's a little bit too long-winded, so you need to break it up. Stick to your subject first. Any questions about what we've just covered? Anything you want to know? Is there any more detail that you need? Mention the word detail because we love that. Because that means, because the autistic brain doesn't sometimes have enough imagination. It's like when people have an everyday conversation and try to teach it in an everyday way, they're giving us stepping stones to cross the water. Okay? Our current knowledge is on one riverbank, and the knowledge that you want us to have is on the other one. Now, you're not building a bridge, you're offering us stepping stones. Step, step, step. And we're trying to follow the stones. That's the equivalent of what you're doing. Because not everyday people like illustrations to help them out a bit. Now, the thing is, we like people to build a bridge that's proper that we can just walk straight over without any problems. So that means you've got to fill the gaps in the stepping stones. And that's where the detail comes into it. That's where we need that detail. Somebody once asked me, this is an illustration, somebody once asked me, "You can drive, can't you?" I says, "Yeah." And he said, "You can turn left and stop at the side of the road and do a maneuver, can't you?" Everyday people would reply, "Yes, I can," if they were drivers. But I stopped. That was tiny little stepping stones. There was not enough detail. I couldn't answer that question correctly without putting the detail in. So I then said this to him. I said, "Am I driving myself, or am I teaching a learner driver to drive? Am I teaching an advanced pupil to drive? Is it legal and safe to turn left at that point? There's a big sign saying no entry on it. Is it safe to park at the side of the road? The double yellows is near a school, is it near pedestrian crossing? And what about doing a manoeuvre? Is it a one-way street? Is the road not wide enough? Is it full of traffic? Is it full of parked cars?" Then you ask me. And then he asked the same question again. If you were driving yourself, and if you knew that road was safe to turn left into and there's not a queue of traffic and you know it's safe to go in, it's not a one-way street, you can enter there safely. And you can stop safely on the side of the road, there's no restrictions, and the road is safe and wide enough for you to do manoeuvres safely, like a turn in the road, then could you do it? And I says, "Yes, I can." Because if you ask a question that's just straight like that, can you drive, can you stop? You see what it's doing? I gave you an idea then of the kind of files my brain's pulling. Everything from no entry signs and one-way streets to whether there's a school pedestrian crossing. Can you see how the files are working in the brain? I've just emptied my filing system out and says, I need this information, that bit of information, this bit of information. What about this? What about that? What if, what if, what if? So then the question was asked again with the details so I could find the right file much more quickly. So I says, yes, I can. So you built the bridge. That wasn't just a stepping stones, that was the bridge. So you can see the difference. We don't have the imagination stepped across the stones.
Yeah, it's again, it's really interesting, and I think it's interesting how our minds are so different, because I actually find it difficult to think of all that detail. To
Everyday people often do. Now, don't worry about that. We have to build the bridge together. So it's built from one side and the other. We work together to build the bridge. And this is why I emphasize the importance of teamwork with all this. Now, a lot of people on the spectrum aren't used to teams. They're not used to working with another person. They're used to being on their own by themselves, having no friends or anybody interested in them. So to build as a team of two people working on the same task is very, very rare. They can do it as long as they know they're all they've got to play. So this is why you've got to get them to open up, and that comes with a bit of trust, because they need help to build that bridge, and you need help to build that bridge. So they've got to build that bridge together as a team.
So we've talked about trust a couple of times. How would you go about building that trust from like day one?
Right, big number one. Yeah, I mean, I always say those 3 sentences are said to you. That's to build the background. The use of questioning, those phrases that I've just told you in there, say those as well. And then the 3-phase talk. So I say, right, 3 tones of voice. Because some people on the spectrum are trouble recognizing the tones of voice, so they've got to know the tone. So I'll say, this is the voice tone that I'll be talking to you at doing normal lessons when I'm teaching you. And I says, I will never shout at you because you'll give me no reason to. I don't go around shouting at people. Do not worry, because they often worry to high heaven about if I go wrong, what if, what if, what if. So I say, I won't shout at you. There's no reason why, but it's very important to know 2 types of phrasing that I'm going to use. Now, first of all, you might need to come to a stop and react. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say break, 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 and then you'll hear the tone of voice escalating up. And it says the other thing I'm going to do, this most important word you'll ever hear me say, and that is stop. And that is said at exactly the same kind of tone and volume I'd use in a real situation. Remember, I have a filing system in my head. These are filing systems in their heads. I've opened a file and said to them, right, these are the phrases I'm going to use, and when I say stop, so they know it already. They know already before we even set off that if there's a problem and they need to slow down and need to stop, those words are already recorded in. We start the recording process early. It's always about record and play. Think about training a computer to drive your car. You're training a machine to drive a vehicle. You think about that. And you're thinking, what types of phrasing would the machine recognize and respond to? So you train them to recognize those 3 phrases. And also, then you point out use of duals. And then you'll say to them, would you like to see how fast I can react? That builds trust when they know you can respond 100% quick. I had one person every single lesson, regardless of his progress towards becoming a qualified driver. Every single lesson, I would say to him, would you like to say stop for me? And then he'd say stop, and I'd go flying on those duals, because he wanted to know every lesson that I could easily stop the car. And that gave him such a sense of security, and that builds the trust. Every single run he wanted it. Every single run. So this is how you have to adapt your lesson from one to another to another. That builds the trust, the fact you can react quick. Lovely, nice, fast reaction on the dual controls, and oh yes, oh look at what he can do, and I get this. I say, oh yes, let's look how fast he can do. And so you can work out what duals can do, things like this. Now you can use duals to help you, things like that. And yes, so don't worry, if I use duals, I'll always let you know what I've done and why I've done it. And then you can ask questions on what I'm doing. So yes, you open everything up as much as you can, as much as you can. That So it records in the brain. Yes.
I love that dual control story because absolutely I spend a lot of time talking to my pupils about the fact that I'm there, I'm your safety net. I'm ready to sort of kind of save you if you need if I need to. But I like the idea of showing them because again it's that they maybe don't believe you.
Because the first thing they learn is the fact that the duals can react quickly. They know why, they know what they're for. Secondly, look what it's done. They've instilled a program into the head that the word stop, so that that level indicates a fast response on duals. Imagine what it does to the emergency stop exercise. You've recorded that program into the head already. You've already taken that program in, so if someone says stop, they learn to react to that. That's what you've done, is learning the response. It's like, it's in psychology. This is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning means that when there's a reaction and an action, together they work, like putting on the light switch. Now, you know when you switch on the light, you know that light's going to come on. You don't even need to see it come on to know it's going to. You press the button, it happens. So it's very, very similar. You say the action stop action, and you say to that speed and that volume, they associate it with the response on the dual control. So if you were to say it, they'd respond the same way. So you're instilling the operant conditioning into the brain.
I like that. Yeah. Is there any, so obviously we started that conversation with saying what's most challenging for people with autism learning to drive. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, that's communication and imagination. They're two of the things to look for in the diagnostic criteria, is those two weaknesses. The third one is your social interaction difficulty. We will not usually open up as fast as you would to other people. We don't do that. We're terrified of strangers. A good idea probably is to get to meet a pupil before lessons start, so it kind of breaks the ice, as it were. Even without a proper lesson, get to meet the people at the house. The house is a neutral environment. They're safe in there. Secondly, you can get them to have a look around your car and sit in the driving seat for the first time, and to be able to know how it feels, because they've got feelings, got sensations, different textures and touch and pressure and sensitivity. You can ask them then, if the sun's too strong, will they need sunglasses when they're driving? Things like this. They're free to carry some water with them. They're free to ask for a break. They can stop. You're putting a lot of security lines out here, giving them about 15 life rings on, so they look like the Michelin Man when they're wearing them. That's what you got to do. And that is what builds it up. This instructor's thinking about me as a person. So it's different from the school environment where they've got to sit still, shut up, behave like everybody else. Do you know in America they actually have a scheme where they give them points? The better neurotypically behaved they are, the more points they're going to get. And it's causing quite a storm out there. There's a lot of other people doing it as well, and a lot of other schools and establishments doing it. The more neurotypically they behave, the more points they're going to get. And it's causing quite a controversy. There's a lot of countries doing it. And it is a problem. There's a lot of schools establishments doing it. Ooh, this person behaved well today. Let's give them a big star. And they're just thinking, yeah, because a person could sit still, shut up, and not ask any questions. That's what they want to do. They've got to know that the car is totally different from that environment, that they can be themselves in that vehicle. They can actually be themselves as people. They don't need to disguise themselves anymore. This person's thinking of me. This person's thinking of whether or not I need a rest. Can I get up out of the car and have a walk? Of course you can. This person's thinking of me. Oh, I haven't got to just sit still and shut up. That means I can actually go out of the room and have a rest. To many people on the autism spectrum, the safest place on this planet is the bedroom, and they spend 24/7 sitting in it. And some of them won't even go to school. They won't leave the room because of that. Now, if that car was as safe as that bedroom is to them, some people in that bedroom's so precious to them that they won't allow anybody else in. So what you're doing is making that car a safe space, like the bedroom's a safe place, and inviting that person into your safe space. Person sometimes might feel overwhelmed or even honored at it. This is a safe space and I'm allowed to go in. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And not only that, you can be yourself while you're in it. Bring a drink with you. Ask for a break. That's for a rest. I've had people bring the parents on the runs because they need the safe space. I've had people bring the support dogs on the runs because they want a safe place. And one person who was teaching was upset once when she couldn't bring a support dog in the back on a driving test. So I says, right, we'll get round that problem. Let's see what we can do. So he went online and found a lot of research, and he tried to find a toy dog of the same breed, wearing the collar of the real dog in the back of the vehicle. So every time she checked mirrors, there's a dog there. And that worked wonders, and she able to pass a test because of that. Recreating the safe space on the driving test. That space is still remaining safe, even with the examiner sitting in it. And that relieves no end of the test nerves and the pressure, things like this, when they go through on the test. That space is still your safe space. So there's trust between the person and the people together working as a team to build the bridge. There's trust needed that they think of the car as almost an extension of themselves, so they can go in there and be themselves in it. There's so much that probably is totally alien to the everyday person. Thinking, oh, this is just a driving lesson. All you got to do is drive and get a full license. But the thing is, it's more than that. That full license, many on the autism spectrum view as a passport to the everyday world. We can then drive your cars on your roads using your highway codes that you designed and invented. We're in the same lanes as you are. We're waiting at the same set of traffic lights as you're waiting at. To us, that's an eye-opener. That's a revolution. To us, that is a miracle. To many of us, we think it's almost like a dream. We're like everyday people. We're doing the same things everyday people do. 7 per 1,000 on the autism spectrum commit suicide. Out of those who succeed, for each one that succeeds, 20 more try. Nearly every single unexpected, unexplained suicide is a person on the spectrum. You are the bridge between our world and yours. You, as instructors, have the ability to invite us into your world. You have the ability to give us roles to play, to give us the ability to think of ourselves as belonging to your world. And all you gotta do is build a little bridge. You build those bridges with us, and you help us. I've saved 4 people from suicide in my work. You can succeed at being the support we need. That is the importance of your job.
It's really interesting. I think, again, listening to everything you've said, it's like I said at the start, it's all stuff that actually would be great for all of your pupils. But I think you could get away with not doing it for a neurotypical pupil, but you can't get away with doing it for
Exactly.
diverse.
There's a difference between whether something is essential or whether something is useful. And that's what I do. I teach the essentials. They're useful to everyday people, but to us, they are the essentials. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, and that's maybe how I would suggest instructors look at it is let's build these skills into your lessons so that even if you don't necessarily know there's someone with neurodiversity in your car, you're still helping them without realizing in a way. But I just want to move on a little bit to because I wanted to talk a bit. I think we've a lot of that's been about autism, and I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of the similar sort of kind of situations. But yeah, with ADHD then, so because again, I see that a lot of people coming up with that in the car, and I know you said a lot of people are undiagnosed. Um, how is that sort of kind of manifesting in the car, and then also how are we then supporting that in the car?
Okay, so ADHD, massive focus condition that people wrongly associate with people who fidget all day, and kids who bounce off of walls and they eat sugary food, and they've got quite a lot of negatives associated with them, like being excluded from school and all this, and always getting in trouble, and naughty kids, naughty people. And there's so much negativity associated with ADHD because of what it is. Basically, what it is a condition of which there are three types. So there's three different types of ADHD. It was originally hyperactivity in the 1970s. That was what I was diagnosed with when I was about 6. And then it got split and also got attention trouble as well as a hyperactivity. So it became ADHD. So there's attention deficit and hyperactivity. So there's these two conditions that join up together. So it was split into the three types, I think, in 1987. So they've got the three basic sorts. The first one is what they call the hyperactive or impulsive type. And the impulsive type is always halfway through a conversation and, oh, look over there. So, and they can see something totally different. It's distracted their attention while they're trying to do a job. Now, the everyday person can carry on with the job, get distracted, come back to the job and know where they are. With ADHD, it goes one step further than that, and the impulsive person follows the impulse. They follow it much more than the everyday person would do. And when they come back to the task, they've forgotten whereabouts they are because it's totally encompassed their attention. It's gone. Oh, look at that over there. And it goes, oh, it's distracted it completely. And you often get a lot of people who basically have ADHD, they get distracted by different things. So watch out for noises, sounds, anything different in the environment. These people would have been the fantastic people who helped hunter-gatherer tribes in the old days. They'd be able to spot prey and predators in the environment. So they were always on the go, always looking around, always looking for some difference in the environment. They'd be able to hunt for the food. They'd be able to spot something that could be dangerous. And so these make excellent hazard perception people if you manage to get them to train for the hazard perception exercises early to keep that brain running. The second type are inattentive. And the inattentive tend to zone out. And I always say, oh, has your brain gone into neutral? And they love that because that's a fun aspect of it. They're not being punished for it. They're not in trouble with it. So once again, we start all this exactly the same as before. 3 statements and everything else that's said earlier applies to these people too. Safe space again. Ask all the questions, etc., etc. No problem. But then after that, what happens is that if they get an impulse, they're told not to worry about that. Bring the attention back to the road, and they're for it. The inattentive ones will tend to zone out almost like a daydream. And then they'll say something, oh, has your brain gone into neutral? And then they start laughing, and that brings the attention back to the instructor. And it brings them back to the instructor without the stress put on them. So it is, so it's very much like a TV. Oh, you got into standby, in standby mode. So often they can, if they're interested in computers, you can use a term like that. Oh, going to standby again. Let's bring you back. And yes, it often happens during a dull period of time on the roads. Let's say they're on a long, long road out in the country or something. There's not much going on. They're not turning off for a while. That's when they're most likely to have it happen. Focus goes. And that's when the type 2s will start zoning out. So the type 1s will get it in a lot of environment when there's something going on, something different. They'll see something, oh, look at that. The type 2s will zone out when there's a dull kind of country atmosphere where it's all like constant, and it'll sort of zone out. And you can tell it starts to zone out if your steering starts to go and the car starts slowing down. You think it's zoning out again. Bring attention back. And the training that I give people tells them how to bring them back safely, things like this, and be able to go through what happened and understand the reasons why and be able to deal with that. But that's what you're going to see. You're going to see this zoning out. The type 3, what they call a combined ADHD, they have both conditions. So they'll get distracted at things that will be an impulse response, and the brain will also have time out to zone into the daydream mode. They will start coasting. They say, oh, have you gone into neutral? Yeah, they can. And those two will do both. They will have different situations where they do both together. And focusing, keeping the attention running. There's several common denominators with all ADHD people. Point number 1, they hate waiting. And this manifests itself in about 50 different ways depending on the person. You got those with thoughts in their heads. that they're trying to get the confidence to be able to speak, to be able to say what they want to say or ask a certain question, and they'll blurt it out and it interrupts everything. It interrupts your conversation flow, it interrupts your subject, it interrupts your task, it interrupts everything. And that's why they're viewed as troublemakers. You're doing it on purpose, you're attention seeking. But it's just the fact they've got the words all structured out, they've managed to get the sentence all ready, and everything's ready, and the confidence is ready, but they can't wait. It's a waiting fault they've got on there. They've got to blurt it out at that moment because they're so frightened of the confidence going. And that's quite a common problem with ADHD. They do tend to interrupt. And if they get stressed out, some, especially the type 1s, can be quite chatterboxy. And it's their way of trying to keep their brains on track. It's a coping mechanism that's built in. Another problem they've got with waiting is if they're stuck in heavy traffic. There's many ADHD people that are terrified of dual carriageway, motorway, and things like this because of the waiting period from one exit to the next, and there's training I offer for those. There's a lot of people that have trouble waiting in the queue, so they have to be shown where the queue is on Google Maps and saying, there's your start, there's your end, that's where they're coming off. And to be able to hold the focus, because the ADHD person, regardless of type, is always doing two things at once in the brain. The first thing is trying to learn to drive, and the second thing is managing all those negative thoughts while they're trying to do it. So they're trying to manage, I've got fear of this, I don't want to wait, and I'm frightened of so-and-so happening, and this happening, and that happening, and dare I say what I want to say, and I want to ask this question, and don't wait, I've got to say, it's constant balance. And this is why sometimes the learning speed on ADHD can be a lot slower, because they're being impulsed, they can go into the dreamlike state, they'll lose the concentration and attention on the task and the focus on the task. They hate waiting. They can interrupt. They can often be kind of forgetful of timetables. They can leave things behind in your vehicle. They get things like that going on. And so basically, they need to, it's more like grounding. So you need to, so rather than fly around in the air like that, you need to make sure they're fully grounded to bring the attention back. There's a lot of techniques that are taught to get the attention, hold the attention. And there's also what ADHD people can really suffer from is attention deficit, but it's also got what they call rejection sensitive dysphoria on the top of RSD. And what that does is make them worry in case they make a mistake. They know they're being impulsed elsewhere. They know that they might go into the daydream mode. They know their own mind. And they know that in a difficult situation, there's more chance of that happening. And they know when those chances are. It's incredible how much they know if you were to ask the information from them. And then they get frightened of making the mistake because it starts this horrible stress wheel. It just kind of turns around. So they have to control their focus, which brings more energy from the body to control it, which means there's more likely chance of a mistake, which means, therefore, there's more chance of the rejection. So round it goes. I don't lose focus. Therefore, if I lose focus, I need more energy. If I lose energy, I might make a mistake. If I make a mistake, this, that. And rejection sensitive. If I make a mistake, my driving instructor will reject me. Watch out for those who've had trouble at school. Watch out for those who get excluded from the class. Watch out for those who've been to another driving instructor before. They have been rejected. Maybe not in the formal sense, but in the brain they have. I'll be rejected before, therefore it's going to happen again. Therefore, it's important that I do not make a mistake. Therefore, it's important that I concentrate on full attention, have full energy, and everything's going to be perfect. Because the reason why I failed my first L test was because I got distracted on the road. And I had too many negative thoughts in the brain. Because it gets to a point where it's more important to them to get the negative thoughts under control than it is to drive properly in front of that examiner. And that's where the tests start going. Everyone thinks, just test nerves. No, sorry, different. So, We have a brain that's doing two things at once. And in a test situation, it's also got a third. It's got to control that horrible pressure of an examiner sitting next to them and thinking, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? It's always negative, negative, negative. So in that situation, once again, it's more than having a car as a safe space. You've got to really, really go to town with this. And there's a lot of ways to do it because the types of nerves they get are phenomenal on a test situation. And there's several different sorts all at once. And I teach instructors how to manage all these different types of nerves. Don't worry, teach the whole works. But the main problem is that they get afraid to show any type of emotional response because they know that ADHDs do. Some suffer from what they call lack of self-regulation, which means they show emotion easily. I have a couple of people that they say to me, I wouldn't dare go inside that test centre building because I'm going to burst into tears. And I say, right, no problem, you wait outside and I'll let them know when they're ready. So showing emotion, males are more likely to have frustration, even aggression. But females likely to burst into tears and sob, yeah. They're frightened of being called babies. They're frightened of people thinking they're not mature. You're immature, you're irresponsible, therefore you're 1, 2, 3, 4. They're being judged for this. So they'll avoid any situation where there's a chance of emotion being shown. So therefore, they're trying to regulate the negative emotion in their heads. So it takes more energy to do that than to drive. It gets to a state where this wheel turns so far that managing the negative emotion takes more energy than to drive. And they get overwhelmed with it. And that's what causes all the trouble. And then they think my examiner's rejected me. Therefore, my driving instructor's going to reject me as well. I'm going to end up without a lesson and I won't be able to do it again. And it causes no end of really accentuated negative, negative, negative. You think about that in someone's head. You think about that in someone's head.
Yeah, I think we're just on that. I'm hearing obviously the driving test is going to be challenging with that level of like things going on in your brain. But it also doesn't. I can see that being an issue post test and having that issue. So how do
So
you?
it causes trouble because there's phobias post-test. Because I've come across people with genuine phobias that have not been picked up over the driving period. There's training I do post-test, especially for them. And I also offer instructors this training as well to keep the concentration and the focus running when the test finishes, yes. I always say to driving instructors to tell your pupil that regardless of test result, you're going to see them at the next week at the same time, at the same session. Because the pupil's got kind of two options here. If I pass my test, my instructor's going to reject me. I'll never see my driving instructor ever again. If I fail my test, my examiner's rejected. So they got a choice of who's going to be rejected by whom. So technically, what you got is a problem. How will this trust and rapport that a driving instructor has built up with a pupil, that's going to disappear in 5 seconds if my test is passed? Tests have been sabotaged for this reason. I've said, a driving instructor comes up to me and he goes, oh, I tell my pupils that when they pass their test, they'll never drive my car again. And I'm thinking, oh, that's the worst thing you could possibly say. Because that means you just shut the door before the test even started yet. And yes, it often happens. You just think, oh, yeah, because looking forward to that, not driving a car that's sign written with dual controls in. The everyday person will think it's marvellous. But us, you just slammed the door and locked it up. You just put about 10 padlocks on, we can't get through it now. If we fail that test, that means you're in trouble. If we pass that test, we're also in trouble. If we want to have training post-test, we can't get it, driving instructor shut the doors up. So it's just important to leave as many doors open as you can. Post-test training is important to be able to keep the concentration running and be able to set the brain again and again to make it run. Yeah, open those doors and keep them open.
It's all fascinating, and I must admit I've read a few books on both of these topics, and it is just fascinating. And I think you could talk for hours and hours about it.
I've given lectures for many hours in front of hundreds of people.
Yeah,
And people hold the attention. They don't fall asleep when I talk to them. Yeah.
and Yeah, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it's a topic that you could dig into and should do on like on your course. Before I give you the opportunity to sort of tell people about that course and anything else you've got on offer as well, I wonder if you could leave everyone with maybe like a couple of just top tips, something that like the everyday instructor who hasn't dealt with this much could just start with.
Okay. Point number one, be tolerant of our different behavior patterns. There's a pattern that autistic people have that is called stimming, which means that if they get under stress or anything like that, you get anything from twiddling things and pulling hair and adjusting shirt sleeves and cracking knuckles, and it's our way of relaxing the brain. Let us do it, never mention it, but always keep an eye on it in case it gets worse, because that means the person's under pressure. And if that's under pressure, stop the car and ask them what's causing the stress. Don't mention stimming. Let us do it. Natural part of being an autistic person. Point number two, the next behavior you've got to think of is total difference in our interaction. If we're slow answering a question, give us more time. You don't ask us, would you like more time? You just naturally give us. If we say, and I don't know, something like that, put more detail into the question next time you ask it. Things like that are important to be able to put a bit of tolerance on for us, making sure the car's a safe space. Point number three, keep any loud noises, even little tiny noises, and things like bright colours out the vehicle. People have keys that they put in the issue. They've got a massive bunch of keys, go bash, bash, bash from Mr. around the corner. There's coins and things rolling around your vehicle. Now, we can often hear things sooner than you can hear. And watch out for things like deodorizers, things like that can either overpowering. If we smell a funny smell, some of us can be quite apprehensive to a smell. So if you're driving kind of like you see a bonfire or a crappy old exhaust, warn us about that smell. Because if it smells like a burning smell, we think there's something wrong with the car and end up in a panic. The next thing is to be aware of meltdown. The last thing you want is just to have a total emotional breakdown. So present information into small, simple chunks you can follow. Make sure there's no similes or metaphors in the language, or turns of phrase, things like that. Don't overload the brain. With ADHDs, you make us scan the road from a standstill. So in other words, your car is standing still, not moving anywhere, even with the engine switched off. And get them to point out what distracts your attention the most. And that gives you an idea about this type of ADHD person that you've got as to what's going to be the big distraction. Is it a big vehicle or little vehicle? Is it going to be something fast or something more slow? Is it going to be something a certain colour, something doing a certain thing, something away from the road at all? Is it the fellow on the roof fixing the chimney that's in trouble? There could be something totally different. So then you'll know where are the most likely to have the type of distraction that will cause the ADHD symptoms to go in. So you're always thinking about that person, asking them what they see down the road and the type of things they're going to see down the road. What hazards can you see? What they perceive as a hazard, what's different to what you can see. So how they can see and respond is different. So you're learning how to see inside the brain. Learn how that brain works by putting them in a scene and asking questions about what they can see and what they're going to likely to want to react to. So try that. That works.
Yeah, I love all of that, and I particularly like that last one actually, the idea of trying to get into how their brain works because that for me and I know from having dealt with these situations is fascinating because you learn so much from them and you see that they see the world in a different way, which can be absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell everyone because if anybody listening to this is like me, has just listened to that and gone, I need to know more and I want to know more. So how can everyone find out more from you?
Well, I really wish that everything was like compulsory with this kind of thing, because they're estimating that 20% of people are neurodiverse out there by the time bringing the new statistics, and they're always updated. So technically, yeah, I mean, I offer several different courses on it. There's in-card training. I mean, based at the moment in Mansfield, East Mids, but can travel expenses or put on, of course. But doing car work, that's a Revolutions course that won the Prince Michael Award for road safety back in 12. It's also available in workshop form, so if anybody wants a workshop, we've got a local group of instructors wanting to go online on Zoom, and I can give them a few pointers. That's interesting. You get a nice group discussion going, and any pupils that they get with a problem, they can come forward and ask. There's also the open invitation, so there's people can book an hour with me and discuss their own special needs pupils, and they can say, no problem, all information is totally confidential if that happens. There's also a specialist training courses I provide one-to-one over Zoom, WhatsApp, or Messenger that I can provide over. And what happens is everything is done to a specific subject, usually courses like that to a specific subject to 6 hours. And you'll learn all about that subject in 6 hours. And the 6 hours are flexible. Most people do 1 hour a week. Different days of the week can fit in. So if someone's got a driving test or working late, then they can allow for the timing. So then they can learn all about that subject in 6 hours. And that teaches you all about it, right from the actual behavior and the diagnosis conditions, right to the behaviors you'll see in the car, reaction, interaction, communication systems, training systems, coaching systems, right down to test nerves, things like that. That teaches you from the start. So those courses are available in ADHD, autism. There's one for dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. So all those conditions are grouped together. There's one for the imposter syndrome and test nerves, we deal with that in one course as well. And there's another one for mental health, depression, anxiety that's dealt in another one. So there's quite a few different modules. Then there's a comprehensive introductory course. So it deals with all these conditions on a fairly basic level for anybody brand new. And this course is 10 hours. And if anybody wants information, they can find me on Facebook. There's the Excel with Dr Julia Malkin MBE Facebook page. There's also the email address, which is, I think I might be able to include that in the comments as well, which is julia.mbe2011@gmail.com. And there's also, you can find me on mobile and on WhatsApp, 07761 064694. So you can find that on there as well. So that's fine. I haven't got a website at the moment. I want to find someone to build a website for me. So if anybody knows anybody out there that can get a website going, because what I'm doing now, and this is the next step up, is to put downloadable materials that people can buy. Now, a lot of people are interested in what they're learning, but they either haven't got the time or the money for a full course or anything like that. So I'm writing material that can be downloaded. So what I'd really love to have is somebody with a site or anywhere that can get this downloadable material that they can just pay for and download instantly. And look, that's the next step that I want to plan ahead. It's just so important for people to know even the basics about a certain condition, because there's a lot of us out there. Many of us want to be in the everyday world just like you are. And you as instructors are one of those bridges that helps us as neurodiverse people be able to integrate and find a place in the neurotypical everyday.
That is a lovely way to finish. And thank you so much for spending time to come and talk to everyone. I found it fascinating, so I'm sure everyone else listening will love as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Inspire Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops.